Hello and welcome to the Curator's Salon podcast. I'm Geeta Joshi and I'm delighted to have Kat Popova, one of my dear friends, on the podcast. You've probably heard me on the Art and Cocktails podcast, which Kat hosts, but it's time that she made an appearance on the Curator's Salon podcast. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I wanted our conversation to look at your year because many people know you as an artist coach and a mentor, and you do many similar things to myself. And we also have our joint program, Your Own Art Show. But I'd love for you to share with our listeners about your year. I remember at the start of the year, you had said something like you had like 26 paintings that you needed to get done by June, and you had shows lined up for April, May, and June. Can you share more of that? How that felt at the start of the year and then having these shows lined up and, having some direction.
Yes, absolutely. Hearing you say that, it sounded like a terrible idea. And that was a red flag that I should have noticed back at the beginning of the year. But you know what? It's okay. So at the beginning of the year, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kat. I run Create Magazine and Art Queens. And first and foremost, so I'm an artist. That's how this whole thing got started. But I had I'll backtrack a little bit. So I've been showing and selling my work for like 15 years. I actually started selling my work in high school and I continued, I got my bachelor's degree and all I wanted was to be a professional artist. And so I spent the past over a decade figuring out how to be an artist, how to find galleries, because that's what I thought I needed at the time. And it was a big dream of mine to exhibit my work all over the world. And I've reached that goal. So I'm super grateful. It took a lot of work, a lot of faith, and like mindset work mostly. And it all kind of came to a head in 2022. I had my dream exhibition in Paris, but everything that you can imagine that can go wrong with an exhibition or really anything went wrong. And it really shook me up. And it made me question everything I believe about being an artist. It made me question what I want as an artist. It made me really take a hard look at the industry, at the boundaries that I have with myself, with my family, with my community, and with the galleries that I work with. And so it took a while for me to process this really hard experience, and everything worked out okay. I ended up having the show, blah, blah, blah. But the emotional impact of that experience was deep. And instead of kind of taking the time to process, I think I first of all, I said, okay, I'm just gonna do my own thing. I don't need anyone. Like I was a little bit traumatized by that experience, I'm not gonna lie. But then I think I got really scared. And the fear, instead of sitting with the fear and analyzing, like, what am I afraid of? Do I feel like let down? Or do I feel like I'm not good enough? Because this experience was very, very hard on my self-esteem as an artist. It was partially, I'm not going to get into the details, but it was some professional issues, some family issue, like everything you can think of involved in this case. But when the fear crept up, I started to have thoughts like, oh my gosh, like, what if no one will work with me ever again? And that is such a lie. Like, no matter what, even if you make a mistake or even if something goes wrong with your relationship with the gallery, there's always other opportunities. Life has a lot of grace for us, and that's such great news. But we forget that. And I think sometimes we see these singular circumstances and we start to associate them like with the rest of our career, with the rest of our life. So, anyway, all of a sudden I started to get all these other opportunities, and the fear was like, oh yes, let's take them all. Let's show the world that no one can stop us and no one can hold us back. And like, look at all these people who want to work with me. A little bit of ego, right? So I started just like saying yes to everything. I would just say yes to all these things, and some of them were amazing. And honestly, I don't regret any of them. But it started with an exhibition in California, which is awesome. It was a group show, did it. Then I got an invite to show at the Painting Center in New York, another amazing space, right? Beautiful. Who wouldn't want a New York City exhibition? Then I had a solo show with another gallery in Chicago, and then I was supposed to have another show. So anyway, you're probably listening and be like, why would you put so much on your plate? And that's what fear does. Fear makes us blind to our own needs sometimes, to being reasonable with ourselves and the people we work with. But when you look at those opportunities, it's not like any of them were bad or a bad idea, right? But it's just in context of the time frame, my own energy, and some of the reasons as to why I said yes to all these things. So, anyways, at the beginning of 2024, I had like 20 shows. I needed to make like 40 painting, well, more like 20 paintings. And I was feeling okay. I honestly was driven by this kind of ambition to, I don't want to say prove myself because I've already achieved a lot up but until that point. Almost like I felt like I needed to save face or something. I don't know. Subconsciously, I'm analyzing myself looking back. So yeah, at the beginning of the year, I was full on motivated. I was going to the studio every day, painting for like 5 hours a day. And that was it. That was probably like January through March. That's the beginning. Sorry, I went kind of right all into it right away.
No, it's awesome. It really gives us context as to, how the year was set up, really, right? It's like right now we're at the end of 2024, and it's like what we do now would be setting us up. So no, I really appreciate the context. So you had the shows lined up, you were very driven, and then the shows happened, and how did they work out for you?
Well, ended up everything mostly ended up working out. I only really canceled 2 shows, and I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. So, I was doing my job. I was in the studio and I was painting, but there was a little bit of miscommunication, and some of that is my fault because I did not ask for how many paintings I needed for each show. Some of them like were very clear. Here's our room, here's our map, here's what you need to do. So I had that. And then some miscommunication started happening where I was so excited. I felt really good. I was like, I have all this stuff. I had about 17 paintings for one show that I was supposed to have. And the gallery was like, we actually need a lot more. And I was like, wait a minute. I didn't know this. And like I said, partially that's my fault because I didn't ask. And then the energy went from really excited and feeling really proud and on top of things to just feeling like I don't have it. I don't got it. So I flipped out and I started to really think about what I was doing. Like, is this really how I want to be? Do I want to just cram a bunch of art in all the time? What is the reason for all these shows? What is my intention behind having all these exhibitions? And it ended up working out. I had a great opening at my solo show in Chicago. I actually just sold another piece from that now. And I had the painting exhibition, but honestly, because of the amount of stuff I crammed into such a short time frame, it wasn't as enjoyable as I think if I would have given space and time. And one of the things that I learned from this experience is just asking for the space. And I think we don't realize we're so afraid of losing an opportunity sometimes that we put ourselves in a back burner. And then what ends up happening is this builds frustration, resentment, falling behind schedule. So this was a big lesson for me. And I started asking for time. One of the shows, I was really polite. I said, I'm really sorry. I have bit off more than I can chew. Can we please do this next year instead? And most people were so understanding. No, everything worked out. I'm really grateful. And I take responsibility for my own lack of, I guess, understanding of the timing that it takes to make art. I think this is what happens when you operate from like a trauma or fear-based response. You don't appreciate how much effort you put into things and you almost like force yourself to just go through and push through and we really don't need to do that. We can give ourselves time and space and it's better, I think, now looking back to have less, more quality, more enjoyable experiences rather than feeling like you have to fill your resume up with 40 exhibitions each year, right? So that was the biggest lesson. But like I said, I'm so grateful that people had grace for me and that eventually I had the brain power to ask for space. And I really learned my lesson because it's also not fair to the people I was working with. It's not their fault that I overbooked myself either. So growing pains.
For sure. I think there was a period in the summer as well where where you did feel very overloaded, occasionally let down, as well as things have worked out since. There was a bit of a reframe going on of like, hang on a minute, is this what I want to keep doing? What about if I just had my own show? Like, I know how this
Mm.
works. How would that work out? Maybe it's time to go back in with a beginner's mind and actually just start having my own show where I run the whole operation, right? You know what you're doing and things like that. Can you share a bit more about that?
Absolutely. That's actually what saved my ass. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse on this podcast, but I, in the middle of all this, I was so frustrated. But then I thought, okay, I'm just going to do my best. I'm a person of integrity. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do unless I absolutely can't, right? In some cases, I couldn't. But I finished the shows. I, oh, and here's one thing I want to add before that. So, it's really important to communicate with the people you work with and ask really specific questions that you need to know because everyone is so different in the art industry, especially, and each business, each gallery, each art fair, they have different expectations. And so there's not like a set amount of work that is just known. Oh, you just need 10 paintings for a solo show. What I learned was each gallery had such different preferences. Some people wanted the most amount of work. Some people literally just wanted 10 quality or even less. They wanted it to be like a very white cube experience with lots of breathing room. And so it's so important for us to not wonder and not guess, but just ask. That would have saved a lot of heartache for me. But anyway, so in the middle of all of that, I thought all I want to do is honestly just paint outside. I miss just like being inspired and painting. I know that sounds crazy, but when you have deadlines and responsibilities and people that you work with, that's not a luxury that you get because they have certain expectations that you agreed upon, right? For example, if I wanted to show with a certain gallery, they wanted my interiors or opposite. Some people wanted more nature. And I couldn't figure out like who I was as an artist anymore because I was living based off of other people's expectations of me, which were fine, which are expectations that I created for them, right? I did that work and they liked it. But I lost that sense of wonder and kind of curiosity as like, oh, well, what happens if I do this? And that experimental part of being an artist was pretty much just gone. So the first thing I did was like, well, I'm going to take the summer and the rest of the year off to just do whatever I want. And I thought I don't need to worry about anyone else because I can just put on my own exhibition. Like I knew it, I have the skill. I've always had it since college and I love it. It's the best. And so I thought, oh, you know what? I can just go and paint outside. And if I feel like it, I can sell that work. I can, um, either sell it online or throw it in the space. We have a gallery down in our studio building or even rent someplace, right? And so that's what I did. And I didn't even have the show yet, but I ended up getting a lot of interest from that work. It's stuff that I make every day outside or in my house, just for me, just for fun. And it just took so much pressure off, knowing like no matter who works with me or not, who's mad at me or not, who drops me or not, I always, always, always will. I will never, rather, I will never run out of opportunities to show my work because I can put it up anywhere. And so that just kind of took the weight off my shoulders. I started to create more. I said I was giving myself permission actually this year to not paint at all, but I ended up painting quite a bit and it was all just for me, all things that I wanted to try and with no agenda, but also knowing if I want to, it's going to go into a space. And then it opened up like this whole other thing, which we can talk about later.
Amazing. Which kind of leads us into a little bit about two programs. One is your own art show, because both of us have had a number of exhibitions and we put all of that information into an art show. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was as you went back into the studio, you then created a painting course as well. And you can talk about that in a
Mhm.
moment. But what we talk about inside your own art show, like how empowering was that for you to go, well, actually, you know what? I I can have a show when I want on my own terms. I don't need to wait for a gallery to show me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that even, okay, this is going to sound, I'll be vulnerable. So even though I know this in the core of my heart, I don't need anyone. I think there's a part of all of us humans that does want to be chosen, and we can't deny it, right? Like, there's nothing we can do to stop it, whether it's in romantic relationships or in our friendships or professionally. Like, it wouldn't be this world that we live in if we didn't have that desire. There wouldn't be publications, there wouldn't be galleries, there wouldn't be auction houses if there wasn't this innate need for someone to play the part of like this authority figure that says this is this is good. Right? Like we wouldn't have anything We wouldn't have awards, we wouldn't have Oscars or Grammys. Like there is this need, I think, for someone to step in, and it's not a gatekeeper per se, it's just like, you know, the messenger. And sometimes like even though I know that we don't need that, because technically our customers are that for us. For example, my collectors can easily validate me without having a middle person validate me, right? But I think it's just so deeply ingrained in us that it can be really scary. So even though I understand that I don't need a gallery, that doesn't mean that my brain sometimes doesn't fear that if I take things back and take the full power back, that somehow I'm going to miss out or lose or not have as a successful career as I want. So what it is not necessarily like, oh, how to create an art show. You can just Google that. It's the mindset behind the fact that it's not going to take away from your power or your professionalism if you take the reins. And what ends up happening when you take the reins and create your own exhibitions, your own galleries, magazines, books, you invite people to join your world, and it only leads to more opportunities, you know? And I think it's so easy to forget that. It's so easy to just wait for someone or hold yourself back until someone says, oh, okay, go ahead, you can do this. And I think the whole lesson here isn't necessarily like, oh, can you hang a show professionally? It's just listening to those voices when they come up saying, you're not going to be part of the cool kids club if you do it this way. Because that's not true. Because all the cool kids clubs from history started by paving their own path. They didn't wait for anyone because no one wanted to work with them, unfortunately, but they didn't care. And they became the cool kids because they decided to go for it, right? So I think it's like I want myself from this point forward and everyone listening to understand that it's not about like it's not about, oh, of course you can do things on your own, but it's like, do you believe that this is worthy when you do it on your own, or do you only think it's worthy when you work with someone else and do it? So it's been like a deep a deep self-worth lesson to trust yourself, right? And you get a choice, right? Like just because you do things on your own doesn't mean you can't also collaborate with other people. You know, something interesting I just read in the New York Times, I believe, or Financial Times, I don't know, somewhere. Peter Doig just curated a show and he's an artist. His work sells for millions. Why is he curating a show? It's like an art historical show. It's a Balthus, right? And I thought that was interesting. Like he decided that he wants to be a curator now. It's not going to take away from his amazing landscapes and magical realism, right? It's not even curating his own work, but it's allowing yourself to pursue your dreams and passions without like always being part of some kind of system.
On the subject of Peter Doig, he actually stepped away from one of his big gallery relationships, didn't he, a couple of years ago? And I think his wife
Yep.
now represents him, and I believe she was already a gallerist or art dealer or something. But yeah, they've kind of brought it into the
So
family, really.
it's interesting too. I really love his work. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, but I think he went full circle. You know, he was followed the traditional path, found extreme success pretty early on. And he said it was weird. Like it was actually very strange because it's just like something he made and then it went completely famous. And then he kind of was quiet for a few years. I haven't heard of him. And then I think he realized like I don't really need to be part of the system anymore. I love making art. I love art. And I don't know the whole story. I'm making it up. But but from what I see is like now he even though he was rep by all the galleries, every artist will drool over if you just even mention the name, right? Gagosian and all these people. He just said, I can collaborate with them. I don't need to be a part of the roster anymore. So just another example. And I think that's another, thanks for bringing that up too. I think when you have that voice that I was just talking about, like, am I going to be taken seriously? Can I be a professional artist if I go on my own or create my own opportunities? Look for the evidence. Don't let your brain convince you, because if you actually do the research, you'll see that more times than not, people who are successful have done this also in whatever way. like
Yeah.
Taylor Swift.
Well, and also what we've said in the past around artists having their own exhibitions, right? Tracy Emin and Damien Hirst back in the early days, the Freeze show and things like that. That was all, artist led, right? It was just like, okay, how can we I don't think people are necessarily looking to disrupt anything, but it's just like, well, how do we actually have a presence in this environment that feels like there's a lot of gatekeepers? And it's like, well, we DIY it and we make it happen. We self-advocate first.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many examples of that. I think speaking of the gatekeeping too, and I think it's funny because a lot of times when people step out of the gatekeeping, then they become the gatekeeper. Because that's what happened. Like, even when I started the magazine, I wasn't trying to disrupt anything. I genuinely just didn't know what to do with myself. I wanted to be part of the art community and I wanted to create opportunities. And now it's funny sometimes when people don't know me and they run across the magazine, which appears very large now. Um, they don't realize, like, I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper. This genuinely started as I'm not trying to control, I'm trying to show more. So and you see this with art fairs too, they might start as an offshoot of Art Basel, but now they're the next big fair. And that's how the cycle continues. So just as a reminder, you can become your own gatekeeper if you want to.
Let's talk about your other program as well. I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of space to talk about that because I feel like part of this journey led to you creating a painting show, program to help people paint, paint with cat or whatever it's called, just so you could have more time in the studio, but also share this other side of your, creative expression that where a lot of people see you as teaching the business and mindset and things like that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I was very surprised. So in the middle of all of this happening that we talked about earlier on this episode, I was burnt out, but I was like, okay, well, I'm painting anyway. And I thought, well, why don't I just share my process with people since I have so many shows anyway, just to take people behind the scenes. And who knows, maybe someone will want to paint with me. And I kind of honestly underestimated it because I was like, it's painting. Who doesn't know how to paint? And I think when we have an area of our life that comes naturally to us, or we've just been doing it for so long, we start to take it for granted. And we don't realize that people might be curious about learning it. And I also found that I had a lot of clients signing up for business and art career programs that weren't actually creating the work. And that was really interesting to me. So there's this tendency to skip ahead, but our magic and for artists, our foundation should always be our work, right? Like we can't have a business if we have nothing to sell. We can't have an exhibition if we have nothing to show. And I really started to see this as a problem. So I thought, well, I can just contribute this super niche thing that I already do every day. And I recorded a painting course, literally just simple how I do it. And I was really surprised. Now I have over 70 students who are in that program. Shout out to my Paint with Cat students. And it was really pleasurable. And it was also really interesting to kind of look at your own process and see how you do things. So for anyone listening, whether or not you choose to create a program of the way that you do things, whether it's drawing, sculpture, photography, painting, it's interesting to dissect your process. Because when we have a clear idea of the way that we create, the way that we get inspired, there's no artist block ever. So I thought that was really interesting because it's like, well, if I have a system that works for me and I can literally just show up in the studio and I always have something to do and something to work on, this eliminates any overthinking, any kind of creative blocks in the future. So it's just a beautiful lesson as well. And it also gave me an appreciation of all the steps that are now on autopilot that are all subconscious that we don't think about. Like, for example, I had to literally squeeze out the paint. Not something that I think about when I'm painting. I'm like, but I had to slow it down and be like, this is how you put paint on, and this is how you mix the colors. And I had to even figure out how I do it because I honestly didn't know. But yeah, so I've been really loving that part as well. Something new.
I love it. So back in October, we hooked up in Paris, had a fabulous time, and I'll add a link to the podcast where Kat and I talk about that. How are you feeling since Paris? And also, this week is Miami, Art Basel. neither of us are there.
Not enough
And
energy for that.
and for me, there's a curiosity or a curious awareness that I'm not having FOMO about not being in Miami. How are you feeling about it? And how are you feeling after Paris?
I find, well, I'm feeling great after Paris. I had such a great time with you and Tanya and Melissa and our gallery Cole, which was really nice to connect there as well. I it came full circle, honestly, like the hot mess that I was in the spring and summer, it all kind of came together and I had a lot of um kind of like what is that word I'm trying to find? Not a resolution, but like acceptance and I'll think of the word later, it'll come to me. But I think taking responsibility for where I made the wrong decisions for myself, then seeing the good part of the art world, seeing how it brings people together, seeing how it lights up a town and brings people from all over the world, seeing how art makes me feel. Like today, I was putting on even a virtual show for us at Create, and this artist, Jade, she does these plein air landscapes, something that they made me feel something. They made me want to go outside and paint. Seeing how art can truly move us, it kind of reignited my faith in humanity and the art world. And the lack of FOMO for me, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. The lack of FOMO for me is this new empowerment going back to your own art show is that like if I really want to be in Miami and we talked about this is going to happen in the future, like we can be part of it. We don't need to just come and be visitors. We can literally rent a booth, whether it's through crowdfunding or applying for a grant or just saving money or whatever, taking out a loan if we really believe in it. Like just knowing that we have the ability to be a part of that landscape anytime we want, you know, and even my gallery this morning, I sold a painting. Shout out to VSG Contemporary. Alan texted me. He's like, "Oh, I got a booth at Scope last minute." And I was like, "Great." And it's nice because like I know Alan and he recently started his gallery. Like just knowing people who are doing it, knowing we can do it, it takes this element of otherness out of it. And I would love to hear how you feel about it. Because before, when I first started going, it's like, oh, oh, the holy grail of the art world is here, and I'm just a poor peasant walking through. Let me look at this beautiful space. But now I don't feel that way anymore, thank God. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I actually am more excited about the idea of putting on my own show at one of these events one day. And how about you?
I think Paris was amazing. Obviously, you, me, Tanya, Sonia Borrell, who I recently had on the podcast, and I know
I
that
love
you've had her
Sonia.
on your podcast. So we met people we already knew, we were introduced to new people. That was all fabulous. It felt very big. It felt, I loved how it took over the city, but also Paris being a much smaller city than even London and, New York and places that some of these other large art fairs take place in. So that felt really nice and accessible, and I really loved that side of it. And I think just being there together, we visited some galleries where, art dealers had sort of collaborated to, take over a rental space and have an exhibition. And that kind of reignited in me a bit of like, yeah, well, we could do this. Wait, hang on a minute. Between us, we know artists, we're good at this stuff. We've both done it before. And so the idea of showing in a place that we are not resident in was kind of lit up again, I think, and that was really quite exciting. And that feeling has stayed with me for a while. So, I was kind of waiting for, is it going to fade? Is it going to solidify? Are we going to revisit the conversation? I don't feel it's something I want to do alone. And I don't even know what that is. But again, then we kind of talked about art fairs and, with the end of year coming up and, Art Basel Miami and Miami Art Week and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm feeling that as well. I'm not feeling FOMO at the moment about, oh my gosh, I'm not in Miami. I've got an inbox full of VIP and previews,
Same.
invitation. Yeah, exactly. So, typically I go with slightly more of a media hat or an influencer hat. And, usually I know people that are exhibiting. So there's that part of it. But obviously I'm not there coaching and things, right? I'm there in kind of this other capacity. And really kind of reflecting on the years that I've been there, there's definitely a learning that I do bring to my community around like, okay, well, this is how it can work on a massive other scale. When artists ask about which fairs they think I would be most suited to, I have a more visibility across more fairs than they do. They might only know the ones in their local town, or they might only know the London ones or the Dutch ones, for example. And I can, explain and show them about, all these other kind of opportunities that exist in other places. And I have a lot of friends who do exhibit self-representing on artist fairs, and they do it internationally. And I know there's a whole logistical situation, right? Shipping work and customs reports and taxes and documents and all the things. But clearly it can be done. And, we're smart. Our listeners are smart. We can do it if we
Mhm.
choose, right? And it comes back to like this superpower that we have, which is choice. Like, do we want to do it? Do we want to follow through with it? Um, and where is the lack of confidence in it? Is it just because there's a knowledge gap sometimes that, well, maybe we just need to have different conversations, or with more informed conversations, and get us there. So I am kind of watching what is happening in Miami at the moment on social media. And I really do feel that in the next couple of years that we will be there in an exhibitor capacity, which I haven't ever felt the need to when I've actually been in Miami. I never thought, oh, I wish I could show here. Oh, I wish that was me on the booth. I wish blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah. I've never had that, right? I really enjoyed the the movement that you had, right? Because when you have an art fair booth, right, you've got to stay there, right? You or one of your team has got to be on that booth all those days. And I really appreciate the flexibility of like, okay, I can go to this fair. You and I were on these VIP passes, so we can return to these fairs, and things like that. Um, but getting, around the city and things like that. So it's a different sort of thing. It's like, would I miss not being able to go to all these other things if I am like standing at a booth at one fair? It's like, oh, is that where the
That's how
FOMO
I
is?
feel too. Yeah, that's something that I do question. But I mean, knowing like if we do that, I would probably stay later or come earlier to enjoy the city and the beaches. But I would just have to have the mindset of like, okay, I'm here. I'm
And I
bunkering in
think,
here.
and this is where like doing things together, right? You can figure out what do you call it? Like what do they have in shops? Like a roster, right? Of who's on
Yeah.
duty. Right?
Yeah.
So
Take
you can.
cover for each other on lunch breaks.
Exactly. And so that is it, right? Where, you take the afternoon off and you're going to go and see the other fair while one stands on the booth. So, it's all figure outable, I think is the short answer. But I am kind of excited for, what we might do in that respect.
Me
Um,
too. Me too. And I think that's like going back to just the confidence and the knowledge that it takes to know, okay, we've done events before, whether it was online or locally, and having a strong enough why as to why you want to do something like that can really be motivating. Because I'll be honest, until this year, I really didn't have a reason, but I think because of the amount of interesting conversations we've been having with you and I and Sonia and Tanya and other people in our community, it's motivating to keep kind of pushing for the purpose that we're here for, right? To uplift artists, to have these interesting discussions and meet new people. I think that's the best part.
Love it. So we're recording this in December 24. What are your thoughts for the year ahead? What are your areas of focus?
Well, one thing that I'm definitely focusing on, and this is like the epiphany that I had earlier this year, and that is that art is the foundation. And to me, as an artist, art is the abundance, and to not chase things that, once again, like skipping ahead. I mean, I can, but that would feel very strange and inauthentic. I can't have the big dreams that I have if I don't first show up as that person in the studio. So, meaning when I'm painting, I already have to believe that I'm the person that's exhibiting at Basel or Untitled. And this served me really well when I was first building my art career. I would convince myself that I already have shows lined up in the future and all I have to do is show up and paint. So a big focus for me after the holidays, I'm taking some more time to rest, but to just really get into showing up as a professional artist, whatever that means for you. For me, it's just showing up every day, whether it's 25 minutes or 3 hours or 10 hours, whatever. It's always going to fluctuate. But just knowing, like, if I am a professional mechanic, I probably go fix cars every day, right, during the week, and just treating myself as a professional, which I am usually really good at until, until sometimes life knocks you down or you get distracted. I'm human. I'm very messy and imperfect. And so just kind of bringing myself back to what matters. And then I have a few group shows with my galleries. Um, and then one thing that I'm doing is I'm actually rebuilding all my educational courses under a new platform. So stay tuned for that. Because I realize I love teaching, I love coaching, and sometimes it's just meeting our customers where they're at and finding ways to reach them in different formats and different options. So very excited for that. And yeah, just enjoying life, continuing to do what we do, have magazines, shows, podcasts, all the things. And how about you?
I haven't really sat down and thought about it or like what my focus is for the year ahead. I think it is amplifying a lot of what I've got. The last couple of years, I've made a number of self-study programs. I've done more one-to-one coaching because I almost didn't do that for like a year and a half, 2 years. Um, so yeah, I really need to think about it, but I think it is just a bit more, yeah, impact of on artists to help them really tap into their own empowerment of like what is possible for them. Get that foundation in place so that they can be ready for exhibiting opportunities and things like that, which is typically what artists seem to want, at least in my community. So I think it is that. I think I will make more of a commitment to this podcast. I have got a few more scheduled, but again, the podcast is something that I was like, well, we've had I don't know, over 100 episodes. I don't need to like be banging them out every week. I think for a while I lost my own voice because the podcast was always about the guest and giving them a platform. And so I had this kind of frustration with it, but I'm feeling like actually, no, I'm really enjoying it again. And yeah, sort of probably coming back with some more solo episodes. So, like I said, my
Mm.
voice is heard, my opinion on these sorts of things. So that from a practical and output point of view, but I think it is, yeah, just awareness, whatever that looks like, influence or impact, you might also call it, is kind of where my growth for the year ahead, I think is. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I think the podcast, I had a similar early experience with the podcast too, where it was like, felt like a lot. And sometimes you just have to find a system that works for you. Sometimes taking a break from guests, I think, because I think what people don't realize is when you have guests on the podcast, you have to move your schedule around for them. And it does add that extra layer of responsibility. So I kind of also balance mine out with solo and really I think there was a pressure. I don't know if you felt this way when I first started. Like everyone wanted to be on a podcast and I had everyone on the podcast. And even though, of course, I would love to highlight as many people as possible, I had to make it work for me. I had to have conversations that I wanted to be having. Otherwise, it just doesn't work, right? So being more selective and um, being more aligned with like the train of thought that we're on or the energy that we're on, and whether that means doing solo episodes or guests, it's just trusting yourself and not putting pressure on yourself because it's a lot of work. I would know.
It's the editing as well, which is why I usually like, I think ours has gone a bit longer than normal, but I also typically aim for like 20 minutes. That's about as
I'm sorry.
focused as I can be when it comes to editing. I don't always edit myself, but recently I have. So, that's where we're at. Kat, I am 100% sure that you are going to be back on the podcast very soon. Thank you so much for being my guest. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the listeners before we sign off? And I will be adding links to Kat's programs in the show notes.
Thank you so much for having me. I will share one more thing. for me, and I hope that you all listening join me in this. No matter what happened, no matter what setbacks you had or disappointments or even failures, like in my case, let's really just dust all that off and not live in the past and know that every day is a new day. Every day we have the opportunity to write some new intentions and new dreams down, and we don't have to base our future on the past. I think that's like the big lesson that I'm having. It's like just give yourself a fresh slate, know that it's still possible, and usually in my case when I look back at those failures or setbacks, they usually are just beautiful lessons and wisdom. So transmute them, process them, and then move on. Those are my final words.
Love it. I always say that. It's past is prologue, right?
I love that.
A new chapter now. Amazing. Thank you so much for being my guest. I'll probably talk to you on WhatsApp really soon.
Yes, I'm sure.